here today. I'll introduce them shortly, but first I'm going to let you know how you can get involved and send us some questions if you're watching online. You could be watching on various platforms. If you're watching on the BTS website, then you can send us a question via the BTS website. If you're watching on Ustream, then there should be a panel to your right-hand side on the screen, and you can just type in your question in the chat and we will endeavour to answer your questions here. If you're watching on the British Trombone Society YouTube channel, then you can add your question in the comments box below. You can also send us an email to editor@britishtrombonesociety.org, or you can send us a tweet or on Facebook at British Trombone, and be sure to use the hashtag National Trombone Day, and I'll try and repeat those things as we go along. And do let us know where you're viewing from as well, because that'd be quite exciting for us to see how many people we get viewing from outside of Chetham's School of Music. Now, I'll introduce the panel we've got here today. We're so honoured to have these kind of musicians with us here today. I'll start on your right, President of the British Trombone Society, Christian Jones. He's also bass trombonist of Opera North, and previously to that he was bass trombonist of Philharmonia, and before that BBC National Orchestra of Wales. So an awful lot of experience from lots of different orchestras. Next to him, Christian's wife, also a trombonist, principal trombonist of the Halle Orchestra, Katie Jones. Before that, she was co-principal trombone of the London Symphony Orchestra, and before that, also BBC National Orchestra of Wales. And she's also the trombonist of the famous Fine Arts Brass Ensemble. So we're very pleased to have a female trombonist amongst the panel here. Next to her and next to me, doesn't really need any introduction whatsoever. Jigs Wigham, internationally acclaimed soloist, band leader, educator, you name it, he's done it. He's played with the Glenn Miller Orchestra, Stan Kenton Orchestra, the lot. Everybody. And he's the president of the International Trombone Association, just for a few more months.
3 days too.
And 3 days. And to my right, we have a head of brass and percussion here at Chetham School of Music, Dave Chatterton. He's also a trumpet player. But hopefully we'll get a few different points of view from a trumpet player. He also teaches at Huddersfield University. And we're very, very, very thankful for us being able to be in these fantastic facilities here at Chetham School of Music. Next to Dave, we have principal bass trombonist of the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, Roger Argente. Up until very recently, he spent a long time as head of brass at Trinity College of Music in London, and he was also bass trombonist of Bournemouth Symphony as well. And he's also artistic director of the latest and greatest brass ensemble that is around today, with getting rave reviews of their 2 CDs so far, Super Brass. So welcome, Roger. And finally, last but not least, we're very, very honoured to have Eric Crease with us. He's principal trombone of Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, and previously to that he spent 27 years with the London Symphony Orchestra, and he's an extremely highly respected brass conductor, composer, arranger, and also professor of trombone at Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London. So welcome, Eric. So now I'm going to sort of open the floor to questions. We've also been sent some emailed questions already, so we will start with the first emailed question, which is from Stephen in Brighton. And I don't know who we're going to start with, Jigs, because he's got the microphone. Just make sure it's on. What do you want to see on a person's CV or resume to increase the chance of them being invited to audition? Obviously, you can't lie about qualifications or anything, but what would you say would stand out on someone's CV to?
Well, I might as well start because I'm not. I should be like ladies first. Why don't you go first? You want to go first? Okay. Thanks a lot. With friends like you, who needs enemies? Eesh. Anyway, CVs are I think, kind of just misleading, because you can write down a lot of stuff and mislead people that way. So I don't much, personally, when I see that stuff, I don't really hold much. I like to hear people play. I meet them face to face, and that usually when you hear people play, you can actually make a kind of a categorical judgment of how they play within a few seconds, actually. Actually, the way you actually walk into the room, even with the trombone or whatever you happen to be playing, there's a sort of a conviction that they actually believe in themselves, and you're going to hear a good concert because I'm going to play for you. And that's what, for me, is the important thing. The CVs will tell you they played with this when they've done that, they studied with such and such. But they are, as I say, they're important, I guess, for the background, but they can also be misleading. So the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. And if the person can play, and can play, by the way, musically, we're not looking for fast, high, and loud. That doesn't get it. I just was in Washington, D.C. last week for the Eastern Trombone Workshop, and I heard a lot of really fantastic trombone players. I heard a lot of fantastic trombone players. Unfortunately, I didn't hear a lot of fantastic musicians. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. I'm telling the way I see it, and I don't want to offend anybody, but if you have the idea that the trombone playing is about playing loud and fast and high, no, that's not the way it is. Those are important factors and facets in making the machine work. And you have to have the under control sound and pitch and time and so forth. But the musicality, that's what really counts. So that's, for me, the important thing.
I'll just sort of follow on from that. I wonder if you've got the choice of what piece to play in an audition. How do you go about choosing the piece? This is open to everyone, obviously.
Yeah, this is a question often asked, actually, of me. What piece should I play at audition? And actually, it should be something that shows you off to the best of your ability, because the piece is only, in an orchestral audition, is only a small part of your audition, really. It allows you the chance to show that you can play musically and beautifully, as Jigs has said, and almost invites the panel as to ask which excerpt they'd like to hear from there on in. The excerpts are a separate matter, so I'll leave those for later. But yeah, a piece, I don't know if I had to pick one. I know the David's very popular, but it's not one I would ever choose for an audition. I like to play the Sulek, because I think it shows that you can play really long melodic lines. The Hindemith, as long as it's not played as long as it's still played like a tune, could be effective. But yeah, the David is very common on the continent, I think, but not such a fan.
Would you consider doing different pieces if you're auditioning for principal trombone, second trombone, tailor it to the job, or one that would show you off?
I'm not sure that I would, really. I think I did the Sulek probably for the LSO audition. And then trying to think what other set piece. Sometimes people set a piece, which is obviously easier because it takes the choice out of it for everyone and stops everyone worrying about it unnecessarily. But actually, I think as long as you can turn up and do a good job of your piece, that's the main thing. It's just, you need to just present yourself and play your particular choice well, and then you'll be invited to do some excerpts, hopefully. I think the most important thing for me is you can tell very quickly is someone's sound. So it needs to be a piece where your sound is apparent and you're not playing in a particular niche, type of music. You're not playing a specific style. You need to show that you have a particular sound for the ensemble that you're auditioning for, I expect.
And so, sort of leading up to auditioning. This question came in from Graham in Edinburgh via email. Hi, Graham. How should the structure and focus of your practice change leading up to the audition? I think we're a Christian.
It sounds like it. Just a very quick aside about CVs or resumes, as they would say in the States. I've heard a story, this could be apocryphal, so I'm just about to check right now live with Jigs, that with a lot of American corporations, if you send in a CV that is longer than one side of A4, the entire CV goes in the bin, not just the bit of the CV that's more than page one. So worth bearing in mind that it has to be concise, and that's always the most difficult thing. You've heard the old adage, I don't have time to write you a short letter, so I've written you a long one. I just had to make sure I got that the right way around in my head. In terms of Graham's question, how to prepare, this is something that Simon and I touched on earlier on today, in terms of the way that you would play a piece in a concert as opposed to the way that you would prepare for it. If you have orchestral excerpts to listen to, I would make sure I knew them absolutely backwards. I've given some lessons frequently and asked of people, well, actually, so, okay, Ride of the Valkyrie, for example, which is a very famous extract for those of you watching who perhaps aren't trombonists. I won't try and sing it, as you can probably hear I'm a bit under the weather at the moment. But the number of people who don't know what happens in the strings underneath the trombone tune is phenomenal. So if any of you are watching and thinking, oh, actually, I don't know, and that, if you go away and have a listen to it, just that small example, that will inform massively how to play the rhythm correctly and accurately.
Anyone else want to? Leading up to auditions, how to structure your practice and struggling with microphones here.
Given that most auditions tend to be a few set pieces, there might be a choice of pieces. It always, and you know, I've said on hundreds and hundreds of auditions, what is always extraordinary is how ill prepared most of the candidates are musically. You listen to something they play and you think, they've never heard it, they've never listened to this. This is crazy. And there are lots of little characteristic mini rallentandos, slighted cellorandos and things that go on in a lot of the repertoire that we play. And if you know that somebody, it's immediately apparent when somebody knows a piece, because these tiny little things will mean, yeah, they know that the violins do that just before you play. And it's that sort of preparation that is just as important as being able to actually play the notes with a good sound. Onto which the lack, Jinx mentioned it, the lack of musicality and actually the lack of articulate playing is extraordinary. Often it's very bland, there's no front to the notes, there's no difference between accents, dots aren't really dots, staccatos aren't staccatos. It's all musically extremely boring, and as you said, you can tell it within, you know, five seconds you listen to. Actually, I always say you can tell how I always give a mark on how somebody tunes up with a piano, because you can hear their articulation, their sound quality, and what they're about. So it's not just the physical preparation, which obviously is important. It's the musical preparation, because in recent auditions that we had for a post at the Opera House, we have a panel system which consists of various people in the orchestra, not necessarily the instrument that they play. And one of our tin players consistently said through the auditions, sense of rhythm and pulse is appalling. And I said, yeah, you know, this is what we're dealing with. Immediately somebody's got a poor sense of pulse. You think, I don't want to sit next to this guy. No way. So it's the musical preparation. Really learn the pieces, listen to them, listen to several recordings of them. Don't just get your, you know, this is another thing that I detest, is these damn Proberspiel books, which contain a few little snippets, usually the bits marked solo on their own. But they don't tell you the bulk of the music and exactly how to play it. So avoid those books like the plague, please. Get out the full parts, learn the pieces, and be a future professional, so that anybody who listens can say to you, they would be great sitting next to you.
I'd like to go back onto choice of pieces first of all. I think it's very important that it's something that calms you down, keeps you sort of on the right track, but also calms the panel as well. You know, I'm a bass drum player, you know, if you're sitting on the panel and you're listening to a section player or a bass drum or a tuba player coming in and they're playing your Tomasi concertos or whatever they are, I just really don't think they're appropriate. You need to have something that's very, very sort of got a lot of detail and quite simple and just allowed to play it musically. At the RPO, we regularly use the saraband, the Bach saraband, as a test piece, and it's quite frightening, really, what you hear. Bad rhythm, bad intonation, bad phrasing, and if people just do really weird and wonderful things with it, weird things, not wonderful things with this. And I think it's just do it simply and just do it really, really well. The extracts that will come later will pick holes in you, and it's all the detail that goes with it stylistically, when you play Rossini or Mahler or Wagner, whatever. Those things will come a bit later on.
And we've just had a question just come in just now online from James in London. What do I do if things start going wrong? So what if you have prepared and you know you're ready, but things do start going wrong? What do you do?
Well, if they go wrong in the audition, you just got to sort of slow things down. You've got to slow down your breath. You've got to try and take your jacket off. You're too hot. Put your hand in the back of the neck. Your shoulders up a little bit. Just calm down, breathe, think about it. I mean, we talk about that with my students a lot. What happens when things go wrong? When things start going off the rails? How do you deal with that? And quite often when people are doing audition preparation or interview preparation, I'll throw things in, jump up and down and put them off a little bit just to see how they deal with it. It's quite funny seeing that, as you can imagine. But it's important to know, how can you deal with that sort of situation? It is a difficult one.
Well,
Just some very practical physical things you can do. First of all is, the rabbit in the headlights. Oh my God, the panic starts. And it sort of invades you if you're not careful. I mean, invades the panel. All those around you can sense it. It happens in orchestras sometimes when somebody's struggling and the sort of the pearlies spread around the whole band. And you have to be very careful to be in yourself, very relaxed. If you're in that sort of situation, you've got to immediately go back to the physical basics. I've got to keep my feet on the ground. That sounds really daft, but feel your feet attached to the ground. Feel that you're breathing low. You don't start breathing up high, because as soon as you can hear it, oh, I'm panicking, and then it's gone. Keep breathing low. You can't be angry if you breathe low. It's impossible. And the other side, if you start to dry out a little bit, remember, if you just very gradually chew the sides of your tongue, you get some saliva going. And they're just very practical things. Because there's nothing kind of more upsetting, really, than hearing somebody who's obviously can play the instrument pretty well go to pieces.
So I guess having sat on a panel, many panels, it must be, I don't know, you must take it quite personally as well. You must be willing them to do well and wanting to do their best. And I'm sure it must be, I mean, as the auditionee, it's terror, isn't it? You have a panel of people, but you must remember that the panel want you to do well.
No. Get rid of those thoughts. Those are all negative thoughts. This is terrible. I'm playing for a panel. No, you would never play for a panel. You always play music. Get it? You're never playing for a panel. It's all about the music. All of us here, we just realized we're sitting here with several centuries of experience. I'm about half of that. But the thing is that realizing that all of us, what we're doing, our job is to serve the music. We're serving, if it's Wagner or Count Basie or whatever the style might be, it doesn't really matter. But we have to serve the music, whatever the music was intended, and put our little bit into it and interpret it in a way we feel the proper way. It doesn't matter the style at all. When you realize that all we are is servants, and you realize that we're never going to be good enough. Nobody's sitting up here or out there. You'll never be good enough. None of us will be. Never, really. We get close. We're getting closer, hopefully. Not getting worse, I hope, but getting better and better. But you never achieve. There's a wonderful story about Toscanini and Rostropovich, the cellist. Piatigorsky, the cellist. And then back in the 50s in New York, they were doing, I think, Dvorak concerto and so with the New York Philharmonic. And Toscanini, the conductor, and Piatigorsky. And they're backstage, and the orchestra's out front, and they're on the stage at Carnegie Hall, tuning up and doing what they do. And they're backstage, these two guys are saying, how are you feeling? And one guy says, I feel terrible. Oh, really? This is not a joke, this is a true story. Really? Why? And one of these gentlemen said, I'm just not good enough. That's why. I'm not good enough. And the other one says, well, I know what you mean, I'm not good enough either. And one of them looks at the stage, and all the musicians are on the stage, and they say, well, at least we're as good as they are. Let's go. So there's a thing that I've had the pleasure of being around magnificent musicians most of my life, playing with, you name it, I play with them probably. And all the people at the top, the very top, not the wannabes, but the top people are always extremely humble, without exception. And I play with, believe me, this is with everybody. It's the nature of the beast. We have to be humble too, because music is bigger than any of us. Don't forget, we're in the same club with Johann Sebastian Bach and Duke Ellington and so forth and so on. These are our heroes, and we're in the same pool. So how can you get nervous if you play? It's fun. It's great to play, don't you think? I mean, why should it be different when you're in front of some people that play the same instrument? It's just fun. I love it. I mean, I'm an old guy now, but I like it more than ever. One other thing, I hope I'm not rambling on here too much, but I probably am, but that's okay. I'm old, I can do that. Is that there's one thing that the Duke Ellington said a lot of wise things, but there's great wisdom, and it's very often overlooked. He said the most important thing that a musician has to do is to listen. You have to listen. This is when the preparation, for example, of playing excerpts or whatever the pieces are, know the material, you have to listen to whatever you're doing. There's lots of recordings out there. All the concerti just about are recorded, the major ones anyhow. All of the major solo pieces are recorded. Get recordings by Christian or by Michelle or any people that recorded them and check them out. And find out the style that you like the best. I like this person's playing there. I like this person's playing better there. Okay, then steal it. Picasso said, the good borrow, the great steal. So become thieves. Grab that stuff. Just grab it and play it as well as you possibly can. And then you go in with confidence, believe in yourself. And the next thing I'll say, and I'll be done for a second, is that Barney Scott, the famous guy in London, Barney Scott Jazz Club, said something very, very wise. He's a lot of other things he said too, but one thing he said was, he heard some people play, and he said, I'm impressed, but I'm not moved. And that is the thing for all these juries, when we hear people play, if you're impressed, yeah, that was terrific, they can taka-taka all day long, or play double high, whatever it is, or something impressive. But when you're moving, the hairs in the back of your neck stand up, because it was a moving experience, a moving performance, moving music, that's what really counts. And that's, we're always going for that, to move communication, to move people, to move ourselves, and be part of the music. I'm done.
I'd just like to add a little bit in there.
Just a little addition to what Jig said. When the danger is of the listening to other people is that you take all their kind of slightly, because weird idiosyncrasies, but none of the substance. That's the dangerous thing. You do the sort of tiny thing that only Christian Lindbergh, say, does, but the rest of it you don't take on board, and so it becomes very mannerized, and sort of insincere. And the thing is to, as Jig said, is to distill all the best bits and be critical, absolutely be critical of the Amadeus Quartet. I mean, listen to that music. And then be critical. Say, is it musical? Is it phrased beautifully? And don't just take what you hear as it. It's for you to distill it and use your own intelligence and your own judgment. I think that's and that comes through when somebody's playing in an authentic way, because you hear them and it's nobody else. It's them, and it's so obvious.
Would you encourage memorising pieces, for instance? Would that take you away from music to be naturally more musical?
Memory is a good idea, as long as it's memory and not amnesia, because there are a lot of people who sort of semi-memorise something and they become so concerned about the fact that they're memorising it that they're not free. I mean, the great thing that memory is good for is making you free. If you really memorise something, and again, not only if you memorize it, the danger is that there should be a freedom in all performance, and that you should feel, I don't know why I've eaten something, I'll do that a little bit different, but it's still valid. It's when you memorize something and it becomes rigid and inflexible, that's kind of a fault, because music's not like that. You can bend it a little bit way all the time, and playing with great musicians, you can just lean on a different note in a little different way, and everybody's, as Jig said, is listening. That's the most great thing you can do. I mean, I still enjoy playing really simple music with really good musicians. Just the playing with the beautiful balanced trombone chords, just leaning on a certain note, just resolving something slightly different. It's fabulous fun, and it costs nothing.
I know Christian actually started our National Trombone Day here with a really quite complex memorised piece. And if people were to sort of start memorising, we had a few questions in about whether they should memorise the piece for their audition, or whether they're adding just unnecessary pressure on themselves. How do you personally go about memorising something so incredible like you played today?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. There's a very fine line to tread, exactly as Eric was just saying. And I have to admit that I was guilty of this myself. necessarily to memorise something one must repeat. One must repeat it frequently, a lot, listen again, get the intervals in your head, there's minor third there, major sixth, etc., etc. All very slow, hard work. But something I found when I was sort of reviewing how I was playing it a few weeks ago was basically that I was playing it with the same nuance, the same rubato every time. And I had to stop myself and say, hang on, this is just the whole point of me memorising it was to try and get rid of the barrier that a music stand can sometimes be and just communicate freely with my audience. But as I say, I caught myself recording myself, which is something that I encourage everybody to do. I recorded myself and thought, no, hang on, no, I've done that at the same time 3 times today. So anyway, you have to find new ideas all the time with the same pieces of music, and that's what keeps music fresh and interesting. If in a tour situation, whether it's with a band or an orchestra, if you're going to play the same piece sort of 7 nights on the trot, well, things are always different about it because we're all human. We're not machines, so the music has to live and breathe, etc. But to go back to the question, so I would encourage people to just get to grips with the harmony of the music fundamentally. Try and hear where it's going harmonically. Of course, the composer might have a quite sort of out there sound world, which takes a little while to get into. But that's all part of our musical training. There's no reason why we should just play the same repertoire in the same way. You've got to keep it interesting for yourself. And for me personally, memorising things or knowing it well enough that the music stand and the music on the stand is really just there for reference, which is another thing I find very useful in an audition situation. Is basically if you know your, say, top 40 excerpts well enough, the music's there, of course it's there, but you don't really need it. And that can be very useful in an ensemble situation as well, if the conductor decides to do something a little bit left field, a little bit unexpected. You haven't got your head buried in the stand, basically. So, of course, we're all different. It's not an absolute that everyone should memorise things, of course not. But it's certainly something that's it's worth everyone having a go at, I would say. It's definitely a different experience to stand before an audience without a stand in the way.
Thank you, Christian. I'll pass over again. Thank you.
Again, in no way qualifying, but just adding something that I tell students all the time, and I know they take very little notice of it, and it really bugs me. Before you put the damn mouthpiece on your face and start blowing, learn what you're supposed to be doing. Learn the music before you start practicing it. See, because there's actually physically and mentally, once you've played something in a certain way, there's muscular memory out there, which wants to do it again the same way. That's why I can do that and pick up a cup of tea, begin to do my shoes up because there's a muscular memory. And there's been quite a lot of research actually done now that shows that when the amount of preparation mentally that you do is just as useful as the actual scraping, blowing, plucking, whatever you do. And yet so few people come prepared. I mean, so often in a lesson I'm saying, I'm just pointing out simple rhythms that are wrong, or there's a dot there, there's a line there, there's an accent there, there's mezzo forte, not fortissimo, and it becomes a tedious, just sort of ticking somebody off. And really, all that work should have been done, sat in an armchair looking at the music, saying, what does Andante maestoso mean? The number of people I have who don't know what the Italian terms are. And how can you play majestic if you don't know it's supposed to be majestic? And I'm not joking, it becomes... I had a postgraduate student, I won't say where he came from, but he didn't know what meno mosso meant. I mean, Jesus, if you don't know whether you're going to go slower or faster, it's a no-hoper. Learn these. Don't be what I call a studied idiot. Don't think, I don't need to know all that stuff, because there are a lot of people out there, really great musicians who are really blasé and pretend that they've never worked at it, and they just sort of picked it up and they're brilliant. And, when those sort of players give that blasé attitude, although they're doing things immaculately, it can give the impression to, the lesser ones of us, that's the way you do it. You don't need to know that. Yes, you do need to know it. You do need to know. If you're going to sit and work with other musicians, you all have to have a common thing that you're trying to do. And if you don't know the style and of the piece you're playing in, and you haven't done your basic overall on it, it's so frustrating for everybody else. So that's part of the preparation.
By the way, meno mosso, that's a form of cappuccino, I think, isn't it? Meno mosso, like a meno mosso, that's a more mosso and a small mosso and a grand mosso. Anyway, I had one at Starbucks the other day. I asked for a meno mosso and I got more of same, less of same. Anyway, there was a guy who teaches at North Texas, and his name is Vern Cagaris, and he wrote one of the wisest books I've ever read. It's 3 chapters long. It's probably the shortest book in the world, too. And chapter 1 chapter 1 says, have a clear musical idea. Chapter 2, blow the clear musical idea out of the bell of the trombone. Chapter 3, repeat chapters 1 and 2 over and over and over again. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Because we don't have a clear idea, concept. There's no concept. We all hear people play, again, technically, probably pretty good, maybe very good. Musically, no, because they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know the style, they don't know the way to play the stuff, and what the composer intended. That's very important to respect the composer. I mean, in my form of music, we're dealing with people like Richard Rodgers and Jerome Kern and Harold Arlen and George Gershwin. These are not songwriters, these are composers. They've composed beautiful melodies and changes. And I often hear people play the tune, they don't know the tune. They don't know how the tune goes. They play My Funny Valentine, they don't know how the tune goes. How can you know the lyrics of the tune, My Funny Valentine, Sweet Comic Valentine? It's a love song. And how can you play it as it just kind of silly sometimes, I think. So anyway, who wants to say something? You want to say something? You live here. Come on, say something.
We've actually just had a question come in for you, Dave. I don't know whether you want to talk about this or answer the next question. Okay. You've had a question in from Jill in Newcastle, age 12. I'm thinking of applying to music school. What kind of preparation should I do to get my place?
I mean, that's perfect timing, because what I was just going to say anyway was to completely reiterate for students of all ages everything that you've just been hearing from the panel all the way around here. Obviously, a lot of these questions so far have been geared towards people who are perhaps contemplating auditions for professional places in orchestras, but right from your very first audition, if you can be thinking holistically, if you can be thinking in terms of the complete package musically from as early an age as possible, then that's going to stand you in very, very good stead. I think, from an early age, we probably all remember getting the music out, sticking it on the stand and practicing the first 28 bars, and then there's 48 bars rest in the middle. Well, that doesn't matter. We'll find out about that later on. And if you love music enough and you're really enjoying playing your instrument, just expand everything and find out as much as you possibly can about the whole piece. These days, of course, it's so easy via the internet, which we're using today to such good effect. The amount of repertoire, the amount of opportunity for people to learn about pieces that you'll be studying, pieces that may have been suggested to you by your teachers. Have a listen to this, have a listen to that. If you've got a good open-minded teacher, you'll have somebody who's also wanting you to come into the lessons to, with your own ideas. Oh, I heard this. Oh, I heard that. Is there any chance of playing that? If they feel that you're not quite ready, or it's not perhaps the best piece for you, then they'll give you good advice. But in terms of, to come back to something that was said right at the beginning, Katie said, in terms of choice of piece, we often hear students here who come for audition, this might be for a competition, it might be for a grant, it might be for music college, it might be for music school. Find pieces that you enjoy playing. Find pieces that are going to show you off to the best effect. Don't come in and necessarily play something that technically it might be, at the moment, a little bit beyond you. Find something that you empathise with. Find something that speaks to you. And that's going to fit your personality. So that's perhaps the first thing. Find some music that you love, that you think that you'll be able to do a good job with. Seek good advice. Find as much as you possibly can out about the music, about the composer. If you're lucky enough to be able to rehearse with a pianist, with an accompanist, that's a great thing. I know that not everybody has that opportunity, but at least if you know what happens underneath your part, okay, in terms of all the harmonies and you have as comprehensive a knowledge as possible, then take advantage, as much advantage as you possibly can.
Great, thank you. We're getting quite a lot of questions coming in from online, so thank you for tuning in. If you want to send us a question to the panel, in any one of them or all of them, then do send us an email, editor@britishtrombonesociety.org, or send us a tweet or a message on Facebook with the hashtag National Trombone Day. Now, continuing on with that sort of keeping yourself comfortable where you are, we've had a question in from Peter in the Netherlands. Stylistically, how much should you change your natural strengths and stylistic belief to fit in with the orchestra you are auditioning for, especially with regard to auditioning abroad?
I'm just going to tell you a story first of all. I remember taking my mum out for dinner. By the way, happy Mother's Day, Mum. And happy birthday, Eric, as well. It's Eric's birthday yesterday. And what I'm doing is, we'll have some later, I'm sure. What I'm getting to is, I just happened to take my mum out for dinner once, and they were playing Cocaine Overture in the background of this restaurant. And as we were going, I just my ears pricked up a little bit, and I thought, ooh, I think I know who's playing first trombone in that. And I went and asked, and I was right, it was Derek. It was Derek James playing first trombone, who used to be first trombone in the Royal Philharmonic. But it was actually an old London Philharmonic recording of him playing it. And I used to think when I was younger, you could tell the difference in styles of all the different orchestras, particularly the London orchestras. And it's a really good thing. You get bored if you have conflicts every morning, I keep saying. It's very important to have these sort of different styles. A lot of conductors that we see, when I use the phrase, it's sort of Euro orchestra, they went everywhere. Everywhere they go to sound the same, but they do the same stuff. And I think it's quite boring and a bit tedious. You should have your own sort of traditions. But the question is about auditioning for an orchestra that has a particular style and tradition. Well, you do need to do your homework. You need to know what that orchestra plays like, what its musical director wants. So, we have Charles Dutoit, we have Danielle Gatti before, very, very different in styles. You'd be daft if you didn't turn up for an audition knowing what that particular sort of character of those people want, and what the character of the players within the orchestra were like. Do your homework, listen to the recordings, look at the scores, all the questions we were talking about before in the bars rests, and the harmonies underneath, but also what that particular orchestra plays like. With online technology, you can see most things. That touch of a button, it's very, very easy, I think. Yeah, it's a very important thing to do.
I know actually a bassoonist, friend of mine in Spain, she was coming over to work with Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, and she had a sudden panic knowing that the orchestra played at a completely different pitch, and her bassoon wouldn't cater for that. So, thankfully, trombones, we don't have to.
Well, Eric and I remember when we went to Japan years ago, a lot of people were talking about that. It was never an issue at all. We had people from Berlin, Vienna, Munich, all American cities, all around the world. Pitch was just not a problem. You just use your ears and just listen, and everyone just syncs and move together. It's wonderful.
And talking again about sort of auditioning. Oh, yeah, please.
These days, I agree with Roger a bit that some of the characteristics of the orchestra seem to have disappeared. We're more or less all using the same equipment. I think the only orchestra that doesn't are the Vienna Philharmonic. It's the German orchestra, actually, the Vienna Philharmonic. People have been using American instruments there. Some of the German orchestras, Berlin Philharmonic and Dresden, I think, there may be one or two others in the old Eastern European orchestras. They use, the German trombone, which is a very imprecise term. It sort of means a certain style of trombone, but even within those style of trombones, they're all quite different. A lecture is quite different from a time, for instance. They're all quite different, but there's an attempt to preserve the tradition. I would say that individually one hears, if you gave that tine instrument or that lecture instrument to to 10 different players, it sounded like 10 different trombones. And I think it's very difficult to try and say, oh, they play like... I mean, we did auditions recently, some second trombone auditions, and word got back to me that, oh, the Covent Garden Oaks, so they always play short, don't they? And I went, no, well, they play short where it's supposed to be short, and if you're playing sort of Verdi repeated figures, it tends to be short, because that's the style. But no, we kind of don't play Wagner chorales short or anything like that. And people get these weird bees in your bonnet, and you hear more about yourself than you know about yourself. It's extraordinary. So I think you should go along and play your best as you play, because most of the time these orchestras are looking for characterful musical playing, and that's what you go for. I mean, the principal over in the Berlin Philharmonic is English. Ian Balsford was in Vienna. There are plenty of people from different cultures smattered around, and they're looking for good musicians who play the character. So I would say, unless you've got to play a particular type of instrument, like a Viennese reeds or something like that, something very special, be yourself.
It's actually a question in from Alistair on Facebook.
I had one thing. I had the pleasure, I still live in Germany sometimes, and the first time I ever heard the Dresdner Staatskapelle, the Dresdner Orchestra, live, I'd heard pre-recordings but never heard them live. And the sound they make, the noise that comes out of the woodwind section is something that's extraordinary. It's an epiphany. I couldn't believe the sounds they had. These wooden flutes, not metal flutes, for example, different equipment. And it's this wonderful, dark, very dark, beautiful sound that they make in Dresden. And the horn section in Vienna, for example, it's because of all those spirals in the horn. There's a different sound they produce. And that's something, and one thing else I just wanted to mention that, we have had, luckily, the experience of doing this for a couple of weeks. We've been on the block a few times. And know kind of know how it goes. So it's all of us. We're still a work in progress. It never stops. You never stop learning and trying to adapt. If you don't adapt to the conditions and to the orchestra, it's over. It's not going to work. It's so important to be able to change from piece to piece. You don't play Hindenburg the same way you play Richard Strauss or Mozart the same way you play Shostakovich. It just won't work. So this is the same thing. I see this all the time with people who attempt to play jazz music, and they're doing it with the technique of a classically trained player. It's not going to work. It's a different technique. For the most part, it's still air, and you're going to blow on the thing, but there's a whole different way of playing music and of attempting to reproduce the music and also to add yourself to the music, which is also very important. Personality, I think you mentioned that a while back. Very important.
Thank you. I had another question. About screened auditions. We've had a few queries about this. I know the Royal Northern College of Music here in Manchester are starting to do some screened auditions. Is that something that, I'll put you on the spot, Dave, is that something that you would encourage to do at a younger age or just college age, to get people prepared for possibly auditioning abroad? And I mean, I remember going to do an audition somewhere in the UK, and it wasn't screened. But some auditionees came in from abroad and they would dress in jeans and t-shirt, expecting it to be behind a screen. So, I mean, there's so many different thoughts about screened auditions. Is it a good idea at a young age, at university age, to get prepared? Should you always wear a suit?
Well, I mean, for us, screened auditions probably not. It's not something that we would contemplate here when you're auditioning younger students. I mean, for us, as much feedback as we can get from an audition, which is, of course, actually watching the students and watching the way they prepare and they react, and watching all kinds of technical things, perhaps, looking out for things where we might be able to help progress. That's very much part of it. I think maybe the screened aspect is for later on when you're trying just to focus on exactly what you're hearing. So for us, rather early on in the educational process, perhaps not so appropriate. I mean, that brings me on perhaps to the previous question. A couple of things I didn't mention in there is that if you were to go along for an audition, what we are looking for earlier on in the process is potential. It's actually looking and trying to make some kind of guesstimate as to how far a student might be able to take their music if they really wanted to specialise in music. So it's musical potential. A lot of students at that stage get rather wrapped up in playing absolutely the right notes. So at all costs, the right notes must come out, no matter how. And they probably don't even realise that they're using all kinds of shortcuts. So again, just to go back to that previous question, what's the best way of preparing, perhaps, or some things to think about when you're coming for an audition is, again, to put yourself in a good place, select the right sort of music, be prepared to be challenged, perhaps, a little bit. You might come along and get some oral tests. You might be asked to sing. Goodness me, you might be asked to sing. Actually, singing has a huge amount of influence on the way that we actually play these instruments. We are all, wind players. We're all singers. We're all attempting to actually, perhaps, project our singing voice through the instrument. So, in that sense, for us, screened auditions, not such a good thing. I wouldn't contemplate that. But obviously, in different scenarios, I'll pass that on to other people.
Do you mind if I take it back a little bit to one of the, I think it was Peter and Brighton that came and talked about the CVs or resumes, whatever. I wanted to answer a little point on that and ask my colleagues as well. If you look at that question from a perspective of someone who perhaps isn't getting the auditions, he's putting the CVs in, what can you do? So I'm sort of asking you really, what can you do? What do you think is the process? If you're, let's just say the wrong side of 40 and you've sent in X hundred applications, I think perhaps the writing's on the wall that you're not really going to get the chance. But if you're at the other end of the spectrum, if you're sort of early in your college days, perhaps, but you haven't got much on paper, how do you persuade those people that you're the person to give them a chance? Is that?
I guess I came from a slightly unusual background when I did my first audition, and I was actually doing a pharmacy degree at the time, so that was a little bit out there. But actually that takes me slightly back to Eric's point about learning music, not just with a trombone in your hand, because I learned most of my music for trials. I was on trial at the BBC Symphony Orchestra and the BBC National Orchestra of Wales at the same time whilst doing my finals in pharmacy, and most of the music I learned on the train without the trombone in my hand. And also I only had a certain amount of time a day. I had to be in that music department at 8:30, which was when it opened, and out by 9:05 so I could get to the pharmacy department at the far end of Oxford Road. And then I was only allowed in, because I wasn't a music student, again after 5 in the evening, so then I could only practice for kind of an hour and a half until I got a bit too hungry, or someone kicked me out, or there was a night out planned or something at university. Anyway, to get things on my CV, I did auditions for things like, as a student, there's so many different courses and things where you meet people and get influenced. So I did the Gustav Mahler Youth Orchestra, there's the European Youth Orchestra, and I suppose I had the Gustav Mahler Youth Orchestra on my CV when I applied for these jobs. I was very lucky. And also I was very lucky, and Christian as well, in that when we both got our first jobs, they heard everybody. And I think there's so much to be said for that, because I totally agree that actually you can tell so much about a player in so few minutes that you almost may, if they're willing to travel to you, you may as well give them 4 minutes or something. It really doesn't take very long to actually hear people. And then you hear the ones that you like for longer. So I think we were very fortunate in that respect, that we got our chance to do this. I'm sure there are many more organisations that I haven't mentioned and that are available to further your artistic progress, but I can't possibly think of them off the top of my head. What else, Chetham?
Just to add to that, exactly as Katie was just saying, was that when I was able to go and audition for the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, I felt very privileged because I had nothing on my CV at all, what you might refer to as snowblindness. It was literally just a blank sheet of A4. And this ties in partly with some of the things that we've been saying earlier on. In life, of course, we're all team players as musicians, etc. But when it comes down to a job, there's a point at which you have to look after number one and make yourself the best thing on the menu. Now, one of the ways that I tried to do that was memorising the Lebedev concerto and playing it from memory, which I didn't think was a big deal at the time. So if anyone out there's listening who's perhaps younger and thinks that they're busy, speaking as someone who's slightly older now and has children, you're not as busy as you're going to be. So do the practice now, okay? And I played the Lebedev from memory. Apparently I was the only one to do so, and then ended up getting a trial, etc., etc. But just very quickly, referring to the question that was hinted at earlier, anybody who's perhaps a little older and they're wondering why aren't things happening for me, etc., etc. My advice to anybody like in that situation, especially for older people, I'm not going to specify an age because I'll get in all sorts of trouble, but older people, record yourself and listen critically. And when I say critically, I mean objectively, basically. The number of people I teach, and I'll say, well, how did that go? And then straight away they can think of 500 things that didn't go so well. And then I really have to press them and say, well, hang on, there's some good things there as well. So in other words, don't criticize yourself out of a career, basically. You know, listen objectively and make yourself, having recorded yourself and listened to the playback, make yourself list 5 good things as well as 5 things that you need to work on and improve. It's very easy because practicing is a very solitary existence. We have to lock ourselves away in a practice room for years and get better. It's very important to be balanced in your approach, and also sort of take advantage of the things that you can do well and try and transfer those over to other aspects of your playing that maybe need a little bit more work.
Thank you, Christian. Keep the microphone just for now, please. We're just going to we'll have to round up, unfortunately. We did start a little bit late, so we are finishing a little bit late. Thank you so much for all your questions coming in. We have one quick fire question for all of you. If you pass the microphone down quickly, and it's just a little bit from each of you. A question from Chris from France. How do you deal with nerves? I know we've touched on it a little bit, but a little bit from each of you, and then we'll have hopefully a nice round, few ideas.
I think we're all fundamentally different, but as people, I mean, but most of us are affected in one way or another by nerves. If you're in your car, for example, it's a completely known environment. You know what it's like inside your car. But if you get lost, if you're late, if you're going through a new part of the city and you don't know where you are, even though you're in that comfortable environment, you feel stressed. So my advice would be to try and make the situation which is making you nervous more familiar. So get out there, keep performing, even if it's a question of going and hiding in the corner of a shopping centre, just keep doing it. You gradually will become more familiar with the situation. Even little things like wearing smart shoes, having a tie on, feels a little bit constricted around your neck, just tiny little things like that. If you're used to that sensation, it can make a whole world of difference.
A couple of practical physical things. Ladies, don't wear high heels. It puts you off balance. You can't feel the ground, like Eric was talking about before. Eric mentioned on my pinches idea here about getting saliva in your mouth if you're feeling dry. So you're breathing down. And again, actually, a lot of it can be done before you get there. Mental preparation. You know you're going to feel a bit nervous. So in the practice room, feel how it feels in there.
Well, I always wear high heels at my auditions. And a short miniskirt, too. The reason people get nervous is very simple. It's ego. You're concerned about yourself. Stop thinking about yourself and thinking about the music. That's what's important, not you. Would you just make it a piece of metal go back and forth and make a noise come out of it? It's not about you, it's about the music. And once you get it really clearly, that concept in your head, it's not because you're worried about what they'll think about, wow, I made this mistake, I didn't. Stop that. That's stupid. It's getting in the way of the music. You need to have ego when you say, I'm going to play this thing, I'm going to knock your socks off when I play. Look out, baby, here I come. That's a positive attitude. When you start worrying about how poorly you're going to play, it's over. So think about the music, serve the music, and stop worrying about yourself. It'll be great. You'll never get worried anymore. And drink a lot. No, don't drink a lot. Afterwards, maybe.
Same question to Dave Chetham.
The more number of times you can actually play through before you get to the point where you think this is the important one, then take every possible opportunity. You know, it doesn't matter if you're playing to friends, colleagues, fellow students, whatever, just say, please, could I borrow you for 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Can you come and listen to this? And just put yourself on the spot, maybe in a more friendly situation, or what you might perceive to be a more friendly situation. Anyway, so practice playing in your kitchen at home to your mum, to that young 12-year-old, okay, before you come and do an audition, if you decide to do that, anything along those lines. And also, just to reiterate what Jigs has said there, try, if you prepared well, trust yourself, think about what you want it to sound like at the point when it comes out the end of the bell. Forget about you having to do it. You've done everything you can. You should have done that before you got in the room, probably would have done. Just have a really great concept of what you want to be coming out of the bell. Pretend it's somebody else playing. Maybe that might help.
I feel like I have a gut feeling that when things start going wrong in auditions, the nerves comes in, and I think it's more a case of if you fail to prepare to fail. You really need to be on it, whatever it is. The clothes you wear, playing the concert, your underpants, in your kitchen, whatever it takes, standing on a chair. Get yourself out of the comfort zone, really, really prepare. I mean, if it's that important, I think a lot of people come for auditions, whether they're college auditions or whatever, professional auditions, and I'll take they're taking a bit of a chance. Well, don't waste their time. Yeah, if it's really that important, under the symphony, whatever orchestra it is, yeah, you put the work in, prepared to fail to prepare. Don't.
Interesting thing, this whole idea of what we call it nerves. A lot of it is bodily awareness. It's quite simple. The most nervous I recently got was when I had to play one of the two clapping hands in Steve Reich's clapping music, where you have to do this. Over and over again. And I had the easy part because the other clapping bit, the rhythm starts to vary. And I realised that the reason I was nervous is that it was unfamiliarity, as Christian said. And I realised I had to go back to my old, slightly nervous days. I went through a period not long after I joined the LSO where it was all a bit overwhelming. I was only 21 and in an orchestra that was basically a gentleman's club. And you had to prove yourself or die. And everybody was all the time. For instance, Dennis Wick, love Dennis. I've been in the orchestra about 3 months. There's a little slow sort of solo with the tuba in the second movement of Brahms 2. We just played very simple. And just about 4 seconds before I was about to play that, Dennis turned to me and he said, "This was the last thing the previous second trombone ever played." That was very... I turned to him when I started it, and he was kind of my teacher, and I had a lot of respect for him. And I said, "Dennis, that was really useful, thanks very much." And he said, "Just testing." And so that environment, it was like that. Nobody spoke about nerves. It was sink or swim in those days. And I realised I had to find a kind of way for it to be okay. And I went to a guy who was fantastic. He basically let me simple relaxation and self-hypnosis, which sounds all very complicated. It's not at all. You can feed great things into your mind if you're in a very relaxed state. That's measurable. I often say to students, look, there are loads of relaxation tapes. Go out and learn it. The first time you try and relax, you take yourself through your body and you relax all over, every bit. Now that takes, when you're first starting, 5, 6, up to 10 minutes. When you get used to it, you can do it in 1 second. And it's a very useful tool when you think, oh my God, because as soon as, when we're under pressure, it all goes terribly wrong, because all our old back to the womb, old habits, they come out, and we go wrong. You see it all the time. Everything, if the music's technically complex, or with lots of dynamics, or modern music, we go back to our automatic pilots. And if your automatic pilot, first of all, technically is very strong, so that all the things you do as a player, you're doing. So when you breathe in, you know how you're breathing in, you know what the breath does, you know what the meaning of support is. Not time to go into that, but it's probably the most mistaught thing in the whole world. You know exactly how the physical thing works. Now, that in itself is a great automatic pilot to go back to. But what you need when you go, this is potential tension here, is to have that split second where you go, I'm relaxed. I'm relaxed. And if you play badly, you're just playing badly relaxed. But if you play badly tense, it's a really awful feeling. So spend time, with the relaxation tab. There are a load of them. Anything of the yoga sort of thing, just go and do it. Make it part of your practice. I've had it with people who've been really upset. I've said, right, before you play, lie down on the floor. You can do it sitting in a chair. It's a very easy thing to practice, but make it as important to your practice as it is to, your lip slurs, which is another misnomer, so I won't go into that, because you don't really move your lips, do you? You move your jaw, and but your jaw's attached to your lips. Anyway, that's another thing to go into. But I really recommend taking that part of it seriously, and all the things that we've said are attached. If ego, basically, if you can realise that the ego is there to stop you, not letting a car run you over when you cross the road, it's a very useful thing. But a lot of it is just letting go and being still and being receptive.
Well, some amazing advice and insights we've had here today. It's a good, really nice place to sort of round up this discussion. So I'd like to thank the panel: Eric Crease, Roger Argente, Dave Chaston, Jigs Wigham, Katie Jones and Christian Jones. I think we couldn't have possibly got a more amazing set of trombonists and musicians here today. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for everyone here for coming to the National Trombone Day here in Manchester. Thank you also to the event sponsor, Dennis Wick, and thank you to everyone for tuning in online. Sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions, but hopefully we'll do this again soon. If you're near Manchester or here, in fact, right now, then please do come along to Band on the Wall, Manchester's premier jazz club, here to watch the legendary Jigs Wigham later on this evening. And if you want to know anything else about the British Trombone Society, then please go to www.britishtrombonesociety.org. Just a final word from Jigs Wigham before we hang up.
Well, you forgot yourself, please. Carol Jarvis, too. We're doing this. Fantastic. And I speak as a regular person, whatever that might mean, and also particularly as president of the ITA, which is a huge member. Hopefully you're all members of ITA, and I presume of the British Trombone Society as well. Forgive me, but thank you for doing this. All of you involved with putting this together here in Manchester today at this fantastic facility. It's been fantastic. I've got a few hours of it, and we're so lucky to be musicians. Think about that. It's the best thing we can do in life. Music is the top. There ain't nothing better than that. Think about that. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Carol, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. I guess we're done. We are still on the air. We're off the air. Now we're going to start saying some funky words, huh? Thanks, everybody.